and who have joined. Welcome for today's session. As you can see on the screen, the session today is in collaboration with Kent State University, and we have a Professor Rob Collins who will be presenting today in emotional intelligence in public health, a practical workshop. So we will be starting in couple of minutes. So till the time everyone joins, I can see we have 48 participants as of now. And also this session will be recorded and it will be available on YouTube channel of Empower School of Health. For any questions, and if you would like to specifically ask our speaker for today anything, so there will be a Q&A for 10 minutes at the end. So you can put your question in between in the chat box and those will be answered.
So I assume we have folks from time zones around the globe this morning here in Kent.
Yeah, we have participants from all over the corners of the world. I'm from India. I can see people also joins from India. There are people who have joined from Tanzania, Zambia, Uganda, so different regions.
Awesome. I won't use my world clock to figure out what time it is everywhere, but good day.
So I think we should start now. It's already 5 minutes. So Professor Rob, over to you. Before starting your presentation, I would like you to please give your brief introduction to audience, and then you can move forward. Thank you.
Beautiful. So happy Monday, everyone. I'm here in beautiful Kent, Ohio. It's 9 o'clock, and I know that we have folks from around the globe, so that is super exciting. So I'm actually just going to kind of advance the slides here to do an introduction that I'll circle back to the beginning. So my name is Rob Kollin. I'm a lecturer here at Kent State's College of Public Health in Kent, Ohio. Been full-time faculty for about 3.5 years, and I was an adjunct professor for another 4. So I've been at Kent State for about 8 years. I do have my master's in management science, focus on healthcare from Case Western Reserve Business School here in Cleveland, Ohio. And my first master's is in positive organizational development, also from Case Western. For any American football fans, my undergrad is from Baldwin Wallace College, and that's the hometown of the training center for the Cleveland Browns. Currently, for those that follow American football, the Browns are off to an awesome preseason, and that might be the only awesomeness they have, but we will see. We're hoping for the best. What I think is very relevant for today, I do have a certificate in development through emotional intelligence, which is the topic. Based on the photo, I'm an avid cyclist. This photo is in a bike trail that goes from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Washington, D.C. So 335 miles, approximately 525 kilometers. And behind me is a tunnel that goes through Savage Mountain. So what I'm looking over is a valley covering Maryland, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And I'm looking forward at this point to a 20-mile downhill coasting into the city of Cumberland, Maryland. So I've done this trail about 5 years now. So there's my very formal introduction. So welcome. I'm very thrilled to spend about an hour with everyone here. talking about emotional intelligence with a lens of public health. I hope this is something that is practical, that you can put into practice later today in the field and in your educational journey. So I do have an agenda here. We've kind of done our welcome and my introduction, and through social media, I'll invite folks to connect. I do have a very informal disclosure to kind of give a perspective of how I look at emotional intelligence. Really looking forward to online classroom narrative and discussion. I kind of a snapshot in time and try to get perspective from everyone or a handful of folks of where public health is today on a global scale, and will provide a foundation for emotional intelligence. Very happy to talk about the topic. In many institutions, emotional intelligence is a 14-week course, so we'll dip our toes into emotional intelligence. I'll reference a colleague and friends of mine's TED Talk that I'll drop into the chat here in a few moments, but it is titled Why Life Sucks, and hopefully you'll be pleased to get some perspective of from that faculty member at Ball and Wallace, and we'll look at emotional self-awareness, empathy, regulation, social skills, conflict resolution, and what's next. And we invite folks to stay connected, that Q&A and the references. So I invite folks, if you have bandwidth, to come on camera and be prepared to find where the unmute button is, because I'll have some questions for y'all here in a little bit. So here is, because we have, I've lost track of how many folks we have, over 200 folks. Introductions would be a little bit timely, but I will take a moment to invite you to connect with me via LinkedIn. You're welcome to use the QR code on the bottom right, or type the web address in. Feel free to drop a little note that we connected here, and look forward to continued collaboration via LinkedIn. My perspective, if I know there's some text over the photo here, but my perspective of public health professionals is a superhero status. So we have a kitty cat here, and public health folks often are very kind and warm, like some cats, but the shadow looks like Batman. I think a superhero that's doing great things, and I really just want to compliment everyone's focus on doing wonderful things as superheroes within the field of public health. So this is not a legal disclosure or transparency, but this is my empathetic way just to illustrate where I am personally on my emotional intelligence journey. Up on my bookshelf here, I have my certificate in emotional intelligence from Case Western Reserve, and my wife will be the first to echo this. Emotional intelligence does not come naturally to me. This is not like an inborn skill. Emotional intelligence takes me work, thought, and effort. Self-awareness for me is the hardest part. Another area that takes effort is empathy. I do care about my students. I wear multiple hats. I'm faculty here at Kent State. As an avid cyclist, I work part-time on Saturdays at a local bike shop or cycle shop. I care about my customers. I care about my family. But sometimes I lose the right words at the right time to show that empathy. So building emotional intelligence has meant to me over the last 15 years of stepping out of what autopilot looks and feels like and choosing a reflection over reaction. So what I hope you take away from this slide is that emotional intelligence is a work in progress for everyone. Unlike necessarily IQ, which is typically a fixed number, emotional intelligence, or EI, is something that we can grow over time with practice. So here's our opportunity for some classroom engagement, and really just want to get a nice global perspective on where public health is on three topics: the rise of non-communicable diseases, so resistance of antibodies, along with digital health and the integration of um, emotion or artificial intelligence in public health. Does anyone want to come off mute and on camera and maybe just provide an elevator pitch of where public health is on any of these three topics? I just want to confirm the students can come off mute, correct? Or you're welcome to put something into the chat and I can read off where you think we are on these topics in public health. Okay, so we'll circle back if someone wants to jump in the near future. Um, at least from my perspective, um, just talking about the rise of controllable diseases, right? Oftentimes is very much a human behavior um, issue, right? So reflecting a little bit on the cycling world, those are folks getting off the couch and becoming active. Um, at least from my perspective here in the States, a lot of folks are being less active, impacting diseases like diabetes, for example. Um, the resistance of I'll use my little example here. We have Perel, right? And we're maybe over indexing associated with um, over sanitizing and creating the opportunity for super germs and digital health and integration of artificial intelligence. I spent about 8 years on the payer side or the insurance side here in the States, and digital health was definitely catapulted into favor during um, the pandemic, and it continues to be a powerful force, not yet necessarily fully understanding the cost and health positive or negative impacts. So just to lay this foundation of what emotional intelligence looks and feels like, I have our measuring tape as the illustration or the image here, because you need a strong foundation um, to illustrate what emotional intelligence looks like. So the four pillars are self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, and empathy. And over the next few moments here, we'll walk through each of those opportunities. So we have a lens here, right? So emotional self-awareness to me is knowing what I'm feeling and why, and what is really going on so I can react for that. Um, when I think about a situation, and maybe it's in the classroom, right? Um, Here at Kent State, about 80% of my classes are online, 20% are in person, and we want to promote open dialogue and dialect in the classrooms. And students will provide maybe a challenging question or a question challenging my perspectives on a topic, and that evokes, as a human, evokes some feeling, and being able to take a step back and have self-awareness on understanding what is really going on. Like, is this student asking from a good place of question, or a different place to challenge? And then also from my perspective, why am I feeling the way that I am reacting? Here in the States, automatic or stick shift manual cars are very less common. I think internationally, which is maybe a good thing, they continue to be more common and popular. But I like to think about self regulation as the ability to manage emotion and reactions. So for anyone that has driven a manual car, it gives you, in my opinion, more control and more feeling of the automobile. So it doesn't mean that in self-regulation you ignore the feeling, but it lets that emotion not to take over. And this takes practice. I'm still learning how to stay calm under pressure and adapt when things need to change, and think before I speak. Um, as I was going through my educational journey about a decade and a half ago through emotional intelligence, I felt that I talked faster than I thought. And just taking a moment to pause before moving forward makes sense. Maybe very similar to driving a stick shift and managing a hill, right? It's a little bit about timing and applying the right amount of power at the right time. So empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Casually speaking, it is being able to understand how it feels to walk in someone else's shoes. We all come from different experiences. We all have different perspectives on life and different experiences. But empathy allows us to listen to understand, and versus listen to respond, and be able to put yourself into someone else's shoes, even if you haven't necessarily had that same experience. I think to the times at the bike shop recently, as an avid cyclist that has ridden these 500 kilometers, oftentimes, customers might feel little intimidated. Oh, you've ridden 500 kilometers over a handful of days. I just want to ride around my neighborhood to enjoy the outdoors. And being able to verbalize that, I quote a great cyclist, Eddie Merckx, it's not how far or how fast that you ride, just that you ride. So being able to, again, put your feelings into their shoes, even if you have not lived those same experience. So one slide that I'll just didn't quite build in that we'll come back to later. But it's that motivation. It is, why do you want to be more empathetic? Why do we want to have this skill set of emotional intelligence? And going back to what we're here, as public health existing and future leaders, along with supporting the local community. What is your why? Um, when I look at my career track in the corporate world, leading different teams, early on in my career, I led with both the carrot and the stick, right? The positive reinforcement along with that negative reinforcement. And as became more comfortable and increased my own emotional intelligence score or ability, I found that I was leading with more support versus the negative stick, and was able to have more sustaining success with my teams. Broadly speaking, I think over the short term, that negative can occasionally um, help inspire a team, but over the long, sustainable time frame, um, leading with support, leading with a more emotional intelligence model is positive over the long term. So my why is that I think all great things happen through others, and being able to use emotional intelligence as one of the many tools in my toolbox from a leadership perspective um, is my why. And again, it's a work in progress. So I'm going to take a moment and, from a timing perspective, the 16-minute video, the TED Talk, doesn't really fit into um, this format. But I did, into the chat, put Param's TED Talk out of Syracuse, the University of Syracuse, of why life sucks. But I'm going to walk through three of the highlights associated with my takeaways from my friend's Param's TED Talk. So the three are the chattering monkey, authenticity versus social masks, and living in the moment with vitality. So maybe, I don't know if we can, if I can see folks here, maybe, but with a raise of hands online, um, who has little voices in their heads that maybe will speak to you in a situation like, oh, this is above my understanding, or this is very challenging. Maybe you haven't had all of your coffee yet today and you don't feel like you're up for the challenge. Who has voices that maybe talk down to you? Does anyone have those experiences? I'm looking on the chat here to see if anyone jumps in. But what Param shared, interesting story. He was in an office setting, and he had an office close, or his desk was close to the front door, and their boss walked in, did not say hi, went straight to her office and closed her door. And typically every other day, the boss would come over and say, "Hey, Param, hope your day is going well. Thanks for being here." And that didn't take place. Well, straight away, he felt a little slighted in that situation. And then he heard that everyone but himself was going out to lunch, and that made him feel slighted again. So that little monkey on his shoulder was basically saying, "Oh boy, what's going on? I must be in trouble. I'm no longer in the in group, I'm in the out group, and I'm feeling, very, very concerned." So that unseen narrative, and Param in the TED Talk, if you watch it later, puts on a variety of glasses and says, now based on the story that he made up in his own head, he has this chattering monkey highlighting how his boss must be upset with him, and that turned out not to be the case. Pivoting down to authenticity and social masks. Many of us basically have a persona that may or may not match our authentic selves, and this persona might be designed to protect some weaknesses that we feel that we have, or some expectations that we have. And walking through life and working through life in those with a social masks limits our ability to bring our best selves to the situation. Now, typically, I would have a bicycle parked behind me. This year, I've been parking about an hour or 30 minutes from my house and riding my bicycle another hour to campus. And one of the great aspects of this is it allows me to very much so live in the moment. I get to be with nature. I seem to find folks that are on this hike and bike trail are very friendly, right? You say hi to folks, and I start to notice the change of the seasons here in Ohio. But the opposite of living in the moment, it feels like to me many of us are on autopilot. And what I mean by that is, you wake up, maybe you're hitting your alarm to hit snooze, you're having your breakfast, you're brushing your hair, you're getting ready, all these things, and you're driving to work or school, and you sit down, and as you're finishing your second cup of coffee, you don't really realize how you got to where you are, right? We're kind of living on autopilot versus living in the moment. So what I hope from our short discussion here is three things. One is knowing this chattering monkey and this unseen mental narrative, how to listen to them appropriately, but also mute them out when their voice becomes irrelevant or too loud. Um, Working towards living in the moment with your authentic self versus putting challenges of having these social masks of being who you think other people want you to be. And then finally, living in the moment with vitality, having the opportunity to listen to others, to understand versus listen to respond. And I'll invite everyone to check out Param's TED Talk for about 16 minutes after today's presentation. So I think my intent was for us to pair up and invite you to share, but I will maybe try again and see if anyone wants to just casually share either through the chat or by coming off mute and sharing with the group. So if you want to name your monkey, right, like that voice on your shoulder, what would you name your monkey, and what would help you drop this mask? So In Why Life Sucks by Param talks about the chattering monkey. That's that voice in our head that constantly judges us, creates doubt and worries. And he also invites us to notice that the mask we wear to fit in and feel safe. So does anyone want to maybe share what their name of their monkey might be based on what they tell you, and along with what masks you wear to try to fit in, and what would help you be more authentically, living and working in a more authentic manner. So I'll look to the chat to see if anyone uh, posts anything there. I will say Grace wins the prize for having the coolest image photo, has Donald Duck as well, maybe in the Q&A we can circle back to some of the posed questions here. So going back to that motivation, I will jump in and just before I see some folks sharing, I named mine Truth Bomb since it always brings me back to reality. I appreciate that comment. I did this similar training to a local health department, the city of Youngstown in Ohio, and we asked that same question, and they did illustrate. Sometimes there is positive voices coming through, and maybe it's a tough love or it's something that you do need to hear. So it is kind of that balance of. So I do like that name of a Truth Bomb. So the motivation for increasing emotional intelligence, at least from my perspective, handling stress is 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 one of the top items. And I think in reflection, um, not having as much of a social mask and living and working more authentic in a more authentic manner helps reduce that stress. You're not pretending or trying to create a different narrative. You're being authentic, and that helps reduce stress. The second is problem solving, and I think that ties back to two items. One is approaching folks with empathy, and also listening to understand versus listening to respond. Um, Over this time frame where emotional intelligence was part of my educational journey, I also had led a variety of teams, and especially when you have those upcoming difficult conversations, maybe someone is not performing well at work and you're trying to have a solution there, or you're solving a problem. During the pandemic, my team launched a insurance financial vehicle, essentially based on the U.S. government's emergency status. Organizations were able to provide additional funds through this insurance type product. And by using emotional intelligence and really focusing on the stress at the time and the unknown at the time, we were able to bring this product to market substantially quicker. So insurance does not move quickly. Typically, a new product launch is 3 to 9 months, and we basically brought a product to market in a month. And I think in part was using this lens of emotional intelligence through all the different stakeholders. And then finally, being able to connect with others. I think my tagline is that all great things happen through others. We can't do it alone. And emotional intelligence does give us a model and a foundation and framework to connect with others. So these are, again, some of the motivations associated with why emotional intelligence is productive. So from a social skills perspective, making those authentic connections, developing and retaining trust, and working with others, again, provides an opportunity for clear communication, active listening, and managing conflict in a respectful manner. Conflict is not the bad thing. Often conflict creates the ability to move forward, but being able to manage conflicts in a respectful manner, I think, is one of the hallmarks of emotional intelligence that definitely can be utilized more. So, a quick little story and a solution, and I'll invite folks, if you do this in your own world, to share your feedback via LinkedIn or via email. So, during my transition of having a corporate role to being full time at Kent State, I taught at a number of institutions. One of those institutions was a smaller school, about 900 students. Um, it felt like about 70% of the students were student athletes. And I had a class that had both American football players and rugby players in the same classroom. And to me, I'm a cyclist, a runner, ran cross country in high school. Rugby and football both feel very similar to me, right? Full contact sports, you're moving the ball down the field. But there was a huge conflict between the rugby players and the football players. And it became first annoying in the classroom, then it became distracting. So I walked them through in this business class what appreciative inquiry, emotional intelligence was, and I gave them a challenge. And their skill challenge was to open the door for everyone. So what I actually saw in the classroom buildings is if a rugby player was coming up to the door, they would open the door and they would almost pull it shut so the football player would have to open the door themselves. And similar to the image on the screen, they would look kind of grimacing, and it just created this continued conflict. And the challenge was open the door for everyone, and open the door for everyone and provide them a positive greeting. And the outcome of this skills challenge of just opening the door and being polite is the football players and the rugby players started to have discussions, right? So a rugby player opens the door for the football player comes in, the rugby player says, "Good afternoon." They respond, and they start to have an actual positive discussion. Some of the outcomes is they found that they were from the same towns in Ohio, and just maybe one graduated a year earlier. They didn't know each other, and they had some common friends, or that they were the same major at school, and they were both struggling with mathematics, and they could help each other work through that. And then another example is they start having discussions of how rugby and football are similar, right? A lot of similar training, a lot of similar attributes and skill sets, and they saw how they were more similar versus dissimilar. So if you today, occasionally open the door and be very polite, that's awesome. What I'd like to challenge everyone on the call, and I feel like we're having a global impact with this today, is go out of your way to open the door for others. If someone is 7, 8, 10 meters away, take the extra time to hold the door for them, make that like positive um, greeting, and if it feels appropriate, start a little bit of small talk, and hold the door from those that are already in your in group, and folks that might not be in your in group, hold the door for them and give them the same courtesies. So I'll invite everyone to email me here at Kent State at rkollin@kent.edu, and tell me, how did it feel being very intentional to hold the door, and what positive, if any, changes or outcomes went through this new challenge and this new action of being intentional to others. I think we're doing pretty well on time. We're at 9:44. I know we wanted to leave about 10 minutes for Q&A, so we are right on the right track. So one of the questions integrated into, I hope, the feedback here is, by bringing emotional intelligence into your worlds, what is next? So I'll ask the leader of the chat maybe to help provoke the Q&A sessions now.
Thank you, Prof, for your insightful presentation. Now I would request participants, please put your questions in the chat box, or if somebody would like to ask, then please raise your hand so we will unmute you. You can ask your question.
We have
Yeah.
a hand raised.
Yeah, so we'll just ask you to unmute. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, hi everyone. Okay, firstly, maybe thank you for the presentation, Rob. Just sitting here thinking with regards to the emotional intelligence. You mentioned this aspect of empathy and all the like. So I'm just thinking that how then would I be able to draw the line? Because for instance, actually the key thing is we need to actually be genuine and authentic when it comes to being empathetic with other individuals. So now where do we draw the line? Because it can easily become hypocritical, or rather that is what I feel it can be, because we're just doing things for the sake of trying to build a relationship, trying to be nice to your peers or colleagues. But then where do we draw the line of hypocrisy there? Because I feel it genuinely has to be authentic for it to be more impactful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to kind of paraphrase it just to make sure I'm on the right track. There's two items that I took away. One is empathy seen as a weakness, and the risk of empathy not being authentic and it being contrived, and that has a negative impact. Am I paraphrasing your question well? I'm gonna hope that I am from a timing. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I think you articulated to it very well. Yeah.
Yeah. No, perfect. No, and I think that's a great question because that I'm going to take a step back. At Case Western Reserve University, it's emotional intelligence is taught in the business school, right? And the sole purpose of a corporation, right, is to maximize stockholder wealth and a very like doggy dog world, right? So this is a concept that I won't say is counter to the goal of business, but it's a challenge. So I think um, when I mentioned that emotional intelligence is a journey, part of it is making sure your empathy is authentic, making sure, like, especially as I was learning it and I was in a very large call center. Um, this goes back to 2009. Um, Worked for a telecom company. I was a manager, so I had a team of supervisors below me, then hundreds of reps below me, and I definitely made missteps. Right, um, attendance was the biggest obstacle in our call center, and I forget what I said, but in my head it was very authentic, and then from the union employee it was very unauthentic. So I think it is coming from, for me, the best way to manage both of these items is going back to your why. Like, why are we practicing emotional intelligence? If it
Mhm.
goes back to solving epic public health issues, is it creating a more authentic, productive, high performing team? Is it about just being a sustained leader versus that short success leader? Whatever your why is, that tends to help me um, manage the dialogue correctly. Like, as faculty here at Kent State, my goal is to bring the real world into the classroom along with create positive educational experiences, right? Our students are the ones that pay the bills. Without them, there's no need for faculty, right? Um,
Mhm.
so when a student, like my example before, a student asks that challenging question and I feel, a little bit on edge, going back to just why am I here? Why are we here to create a positive experience? Going back to that why is important. The top book on my shelf here is Bill George's Discover Your True North. Great book.
Okay.
And the Cliff Note version of that book is these executives' stories and what is their why. And I think that again supports, um, if you're leading from a positive place, um, and most public health professionals are, emotional intelligence worked through. Um, I think that kind of addresses that empathy being a weakness. The other aspect, I'm sorry, the authenticity, but then the other aspect was empathy being a weakness. I think being comfortable in your own skin, going back to those masks or that authentic self. Um, if your mask is to be an executive leader, right, in public health, you want to, carry yourself in a certain way. But if you're comfortable being challenged, um, everything seems to play out well. So that's the interconnection. I don't believe, in my experience, again, it's a journey, been doing this for a number of years, is I've never experienced a student, an employee, an upper level, a stakeholder recognize, oh, look, they're using emotional intelligence. I'm going to go play this against them. That's hasn't occurred to me. Um, a lot of the faculty at Case Western are kind of like the first generation or second generation educators of emotional intelligence. I've had conversations with them, and they've never shared like that using emotional intelligence came back to bite the leader or bite, you know, the person that was trying to be more empathetic. But great question. You want
I
me to
can
jump in?
see
Go
there are
ahead.
multiple of questions has been put in chat box. Prof.
So I will start at, okay, 9:47. I need a little clarity on the open door. My network um, was poor here. Yeah, so just a little clarity on the challenge of the exercise of opening doors for others. It doesn't need to be necessarily only at work or only in school or only in a certain place that where your network of friends are or colleagues are. Just in the community as a whole, I think is the best way, you know, to present that. My example was these rugby and football players on this small college campus. Um, but the students actually shared that they took it out to the community. Um, there is a large shopping mall near this college, and they said, yeah, when we went to the mall, you know, we just opened the door for, you know, the little kid coming into the mall with their parents along with the grandparents, all these different folks. And their experience was they'd say, oh, I see you're wearing, you know, a college's name, you know, football, you know, what position do you play? And created, I think, more goodwill for that institution as a whole by working through that in the community. What is the balance between emotional intelligence versus intelligence IQ? Um, the question of balance, I think I kind of struggle to answer. Um, there's a lot of different articles between that. Um, my perception is that intelligence is kind of a fixed score, right? Your intelligence is what it is. You can learn more, but your intelligence is just part of your DNA and such. And emotional intelligence is more of a skill or a tool that you're putting into your toolbox that with practice has the ability to improve over time, regardless of um, your actual intelligence. Um, my metaphor, I guess, is that you don't need to be the smartest person in the room, but if you can help use emotional intelligence well, you know, just empathy, listening, asking the right discovery questions. Um, Oftentimes, you can kind of move the project or the challenge forward. And you know, if you need a data scientist, you can get them involved associated with that. I hope that helps. James or Kingsley, I don't know which order we have the first or last name, but how can emotional intelligence be practically integrated into public health decision making, especially under high pressure or emergency response? I'm going to circle back and just provide a example from the city of Youngstown, a story that they shared. Um, Youngstown is an old steel mill city. It's working to reinvent itself, and it has a plethora of opportunities and a plethora of high points. One of the high points that they shared is with using community health workers, they created little public health hubs. So in different community centers, they implemented just having a small staff and worked on, you know, a very neighborhood focused public health approach. And where I think emotional intelligence came into play is really that active listening um, to understand what that community needed most. Now, I think from a emergency response, like my example often is like in the classroom if I'm having this discussion, and there's a time for command and control. And in a true emergency situation, command and control might take the best way to go. A couple other questions here watching the clock. How do you empathize with someone who doesn't need your help? I guess I would probably need to know a little bit more about that situation to help answer that question. So sorry, I don't have a super clear answer there, but you're welcome, to connect via LinkedIn, and I will share off my LinkedIn page. There's a bookings. I actually have, I think, pretty liberal times available. So for our global format, if you wanted to have a discussion, I would invite that. How can we help someone to develop emotional intelligence? I think a great additional foundation is there's some great Harvard Business Review articles on the topic is a great place to start. I think people have to want to change. David Cooper Ryder, one of my faculty that was at Case Western, said that you can be the best change management or inspiring leader, and if someone doesn't want to change, it's hard to make that change. So there's some great readings out there. Just being self-aware of the different aspects of emotional intelligence, but the foundation is they want to need to change. So I know we're right at 10. I have no problem going longer. Do I'm going to continue to read through the questions or advance through the last slide here? I want to make sure I manage everyone's time appropriately. As I advance the slide, I'll just kind of circle back. I see, how do you emphasize without being taken advantage of? I think that's a valid question. Again, I have not necessarily experienced that someone went down that path specifically because of using emotional intelligence. So as we're right at the hour here, I'll just kind of recycle the QR code that should land you onto my LinkedIn page. Relatively active there, would be happy to continue the discussions. As I mentioned, there's a bookings link to connect with office hours, and would be happy to continue that narrative. I'm excessively thankful for everyone participating and the awesome invite to share my perspective on emotional intelligence. And we have the references because we are in academia. There's 2 pages where we have the TED Talk plus some content, which also are probably all great resources to build upon the understanding of emotional intelligence. And I'll hang out if anyone wants to ask any additional questions. But again, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Prof, for your insightful presentation and also answering the question that has been posted. As you mentioned, I have put in your link over here on the chat. So if anybody would like to speak to you, so they can book their calendar and your calendar as well. Thank you for your insightful information. And for more upcoming session, I would request you all to please visit our social media handle for all upcoming session, webinars. Thank you all for your presence, and special thanks for Professor Rao for his valuable presentation. Thank you.
Thank you much. Have a great day.
You too.
All right. Thanks. Cheers, everyone.